Hello, this is Tim Lightfellow again in the Kingdom of Ontario, Society for Creative Anachronism. Today's video is looking at handbow safety. I recently did one on crossbow safety. This will kind of track along the same lines, so some of this overlaps with equipment inspection, equipment maintenance, but the goal is to look at what things could cause safe or unsafe conditions, either for the archer or things that others, people who inspect that might also be looking for. So I will start out, much like I did the crossbow one, with ways of stringing a handbow. There are three primary ways I'm aware of. One of those is what they refer to as a step-through method, and I have not learned that. I don't use it, and I'm not going to use it. If done incorrectly, can lead to limb twist. If done correctly, is just fine. And a lot of people use it, especially it seems like a lot of archers who've been doing this a while, because that tends to be how they learned back in the day, and that's what they do. The next step, which I will show you, is using a stringer. This particular one is basically paracord. It has a rubber stop on one end, and it has a leather cup on the other. There are different versions of this for different bow types, like longbow tends to have a really short leather cup because the string knocks right near the end of the limb. I've seen a triangle shaped one, actually I have one, that seems to work well for horse bow because of the way it fits over the end of the siyas. So a couple different options based on the type of bow. All my demonstrations today will be using just a recurve. I have had neck fusion and have some issues, so I've found a nice lightweight bow that I can work with for showing this. So first thing on this one, I have a string keep, so I'm going to take that off. Okay, I'm not sure how well this is going to show, but the idea of a stringer is that the cup end goes on the bottom limb, which is the side you always leave strung. The top, which is where the string slides down the limb when you unstring it. You put the rubber stop end on the inside of the string so that while it's holding the pressure, you can slide the string onto the limb. I spread it out usually as far as I can. You can use either 1 foot or 2. I can't really get this camera to show low enough, but basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put either 1 foot right below my hand or 2 feet slightly spread out below the riser on the stringer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally pull up on the riser until I can slide the string onto the limb tip, and I carefully let go, because one thing I've seen happen is the string quite caught, you let go fast and it pops the string back off, which then of course makes the bow flop up because it's a recurve. It tends to pop back to non-strung state, which can surprise and possibly hit people who are standing nearby watching. So that's that method. There's another method that I can explain, and I will kind of demonstrate. Again, it's not using any kind of extra tools. It can, if done wrong, lead to limb twist. This bow actually already has limb twist, so I'm not as worried with this one. This is a method that I find that I'll use usually with really lightweight bows. Like if we have, 20, 22 pound bow that we're hurrying up and stringing up as loner gear. And what this method, again, it's hard to show you, but I take the tip, the bottom tip, I put it basically right in under the arch of my foot on my shoe. So it's being held right at the bottom of the foot. And then I will use this. So if this is unstrung, I will literally grab the string and slide the string on as I push. And again, as you can see, if I push with different force, I could introduce limb twist over a period of time. One time of doing it shouldn't, but if you do it the same way over and over, and that same way is putting more force on one side of the limb than the other, you can introduce limb twist. So there's stringing up bows, specifically recurve. Like I said, hand bows are different. Horse bows can be different, especially because some of those unstrung make almost a C shape in the opposite direction. So knowing how to get them better to get the string on, some of those I don't even know, to be honest. But there are tricks and techniques that this wouldn't apply to. On to safety considerations for a bow. The biggest concern is delamination. So if you look along the sides and edges, you're looking for any sign that any of the layers are starting to separate, which can lead to it delaminating. What a delamination is literally this is laminated layers on most bows. In that case, wood in the middle. It looks like 2 layers of wood, and then fiberglass on the belly and the face. So it's a 4-layer in this instance. They're made differently, so how many layers and which products is going to vary, but most of the bows we use are laminated in some fashion. And so a delamination is literally the glue giving way and those layers separating. I have an example. I didn't find it when I was trying to grab stuff for the video. And frankly, I'm in Western Washington and not sure when the rain's going to start. So I was trying to hurry up and gather what I could to get this done. But I have an example of someone who, I have the bow from someone who was shooting a York, and we shot 12 ends at 100 yards just fine. We get to the 80 and he draws it back and we all hear this kind of crackle, snap sound. And we look over and he's holding his bow from about here down in his hand. And you can see that it delaminated from the cut out of the riser and it snapped up here. And that part's just laying on the ground. And it's like, oh. So thankfully, all the delaminations I've seen haven't led to injury. I've seen some one-piece wood bows, particularly like a longbow. Some of those are made out of just a single piece of wood rather than having any lamination. And I've seen one of those snap and actually strike a person as it flew. So there is potential for injury, more so with something that does a clean break than something that's laminated that's going to take some of the energy just trying to peel away the layers from the experiences I've seen. Okay. Safety concerns here. Is there anything sharp on the limb tips that might be causing your string to fray and cut that can cause string failure? So that would be one safety concern. We generally put serving on the center. I'll move closer to the camera. It should hopefully be visible. So the string is here, and then we have this black serving. Main reason for that is it protects the string. So when the serving goes bad, you replace the serving. It's faster, it's cheaper than replacing the whole string every time. Not a safety thing, not required. Waxing the string is a very important thing to keep it good. Actually, this one feels like it could use it soon. So by waxing it, you hope to keep the string more flexible. You hope to keep it from fraying, because if it dries out, it tends to start fraying, and then you can have that lead to string failure. We talked about delam. On most recurves, I think I've seen one recurve that had any kind of issue with the handle or the riser, and that was because literally where the cutout and this piece are was the joint in layers of wood going sideways. And so I've seen one where the handle literally just kind of started peeling away from the bow. I wouldn't call that a safety issue, but it's something to be aware of if you own one where that might be able to happen. Is, keep an eye on it. Again, since it's just literally just put the shelf down, or it was in that case, I would think it would be probably not structural and could probably easily be glued and clamped back together and be repaired. Let's see. One safety concern that's perhaps less apparent is having a bow that's an appropriate length for the archer. And when I say that, like, we can get horse bows go down to, I think I've seen some down to 50 or 52 inches long. Now, most horse bows are designed for 32-inch draw, so that's in a way not a good example. But what I'm getting at is you can have shorter bows, and then you get someone who's over 6 foot as a really, maybe they're not even 6 foot, but they have a really long arm span, so their draw length is 30, 32 inches. They're gonna want a longer bow to be able to handle that kind of draw length. If you shoot like a 60-inch bow and you're pulling it 30, 32 inches all the time, you're putting extra stress on it, and you're probably going to have it fail faster than if you got like a 69-inch bow, 70-inch bow, and are drawing that 30, 32 inches, because you have more of the bow, and it's actually not having to bend quite as much to get that extra draw length. So that is something to consider. It's not a necessarily mandatory thing, just some information and a suggestion. Okay. Another thing to consider with bows and talking about delamination, we have a lot of these show up on ranges. This is just a simple fiberglass bow. I hesitate to refer to it as a kid's bow, but that's normally where we see them. Is someone found one at Goodwill or something, thrift store, and it was a lightweight bow, and they bought it so their kid could start getting into archery. And the thing I want to mostly point out about on these, and it tends to be more true with the older ones like this, the newer ones tend to be like a solid green, a solid black, solid red. But you'll notice this older style has a lot of coloration variance in it. Let me see if I can get close to the camera to really try and show that. So what you can have happen then is you can have faults that end up lining up with these variants in the color and can make them harder to find. This particular one, yes, I grabbed the right one, yay. So I use this one for one of my equipment inspection classes because right along this limb, forgive me, I'm trying to look at a screen, and now that the sun's out, it's hard to see how well this is showing, but right along here, coming down from the string groove cutout, is a crack that was not seen initially, and this bow was almost sold to someone in our branch. as a useful bow for their kid. And then we went back and looked and caught that there's actually a crack right along that color variation line coming down from the string groove. So again, an example of being aware of your equipment and knowing that on something like this, you have to be just a little extra cautious when you inspect it to see if there are any faults that might look like they're actually just part of the natural color variation on the bow. Okay, that is mostly what I can think of for bows. I will point out this kind of has it. So, okay, so I'll use this as an example. It's not a great one. On the back of this limb, there's this section that's dark wood colored. So it's basically just a built up section for where the string sits and for the string groove. This one extends far enough, it might actually be semi-structural. A lot of bows have this and they're not actually structural. And a lot of them have them on both sides. So they'll build up the front to make it, just to make the tip thicker. And I've seen bows show up on the range where one of those is missing and they're worried that it's not shootable. And the answer is, as long as there's no rough edge that's going to cut the string, that entirely for looks and for thickening the limb to make the string loop hold on a little better. As long as the string's going to stay put, a lot of times those aren't issues. So a lot of times it's not a safety concern. Now, like I said, this one extends far enough. It's going through a decent part of the recurve here. And so there might actually be some structural value on this one. So on this one, if I saw chunks missing, that might be a concern. Okay. Now to arrows. So we'll see how well this shows, and especially trying to do this with the headset on is not ideal. Trying to put that in the ground for a moment. Okay, so my draw length is about, 28 to 29 inches. Okay, and I just was reminded one other safety thing. If you borrow someone else's bow, it's very good to know whether they do knock above or knock below if they have a knock bead. Because if they do knock above, then the knock bead is set low. If you knock below that and shoot, you're actually angling the arrow up, so it's going to fly further. And vice versa, if they do knock below and you knock above, you're going to be shooting down. Less of a safety concern, it's going into the ground, but still frustrating as an archer to have to, wondering why is this not working right? Okay. So there are lots of draw ways. There's 3 fingers under, 1 finger under, 2 below. I've heard of people just doing 1 and 1. I tend to choose 1 and 2 and not pinching the arrow, but just grabbing the string. So my draw length is about 28 inches. I made these arrows about 29-ish inches. That way, if I ever overdraw at all for any like distance shoots or something, I have a little bit of space to go. So it may not be obvious with this arrow. This may be too close to my draw length. And I'm actually going to, my backstop's over there. I don't really feel safe pointing that way. Okay, so let me draw this and then I'll kind of explain things here. So this arrow is too short, but just barely. Like I said, it's actually pretty close to right onto what my draw length is. What happens if it's too short, and it's not quite as much of an issue with this type of rest. This is a feather rest, but if you have a standard arrow rest, you end up bringing the tip of the arrow onto the rest, and that really can mess with consistency and the way it flies. If it's really too short, it can actually come back and come off. And I've seen people where they walk up to me with a bow that has an arrow on it, but the string is full draw and the arrow is literally jammed into the back of the bow because it came all the way off and jammed into it. So, one of the safety things then with arrows is making sure the length matches what you need as an archer so that you're able to get your full draw. If you're not doing a full draw, I've heard of some people doing that for health, for physical reasons. As long as what you're doing is safe, okay. If it's just because that's all you could get and you notice that it's kind of not feeling great, trying to do a shorter draw can lead to injury. So do be cautious and be aware of what you're doing, and ideally get arrows that match your draw length, and then you don't have that issue. But again, some people, like I'm actually making a set of arrows for someone right now who said, hey, I can't do a full draw right now. So she's aware of it. She's aware of her form, what she's doing to adjust because of it. So perfect situation there. Okay. Arrows. Frankly, there's not a lot in terms of like the parts. Like if the tip comes off, it's not going to be nice. It may stick into the butt. It may break when it hits the butt. But that's downrange. That's not really going to cause safety concerns for you. If the knock comes off when you're shooting, that could, because that could cause it to misfire strangely. I have one set of period arrows that I was trying the new hardwood nocks, and I did think about it, and I sealed the shaft, then I glued the nocks on, and so that glue didn't bond very well. And so one of my shots, I literally shoot and I look down and the knock is still on the string. Thankfully, the arrow just went straight, but that would probably be the biggest thing about an arrow that in the process of shooting that could cause a safety issue just with regard to how an arrow is built and like that. Now, another concern that can cause a safety issue when shooting is what's referred to as the spine of the arrow. So arrows have a certain spine or how much weight they are designed to handle to flex. These, as I recall, we did 30 to 35 pound for this set because I shoot a 32-pound bow now. And so I'm going to go over a couple things with regard to that. One is it's 32 pounds and 28 inches. So if I do choose to overdraw to 29 inches, I'm going to want to probably scale my bow and see how much weight that's adding. These are still safe to shoot. Bows are made differently. They have different efficiencies. So overdrawing, we typically consider can add 2 to 3 pounds per inch of draw. But again, it depends on the bow. Some bows really do what's referred to as stacking, which is that the further back, the harder it is to pull. I recall shooting a friend's horse bow, and literally right at my draw length was right at the end of the sweet spot. And if I went back any further, it really started stacking, and that's kind of how helped me know that I was drawing to the right spot. But had I chosen to try and draw further, and with the way it stacked, it would probably have added more like 3 to 4 pounds per inch, just how hard it was stacking once you got to that point. So knowing not the rating of your bow, but what the bow scales at your draw length is important for getting arrows that will work for you. Arrows that are spined heavier than what you are drawing are not going to be a safety issue. They're not going to be any kind of problem. They're going to change the way you have to aim because if you're a right-handed archer, if you're shooting with any amount of archer's paradox, which is to say not a bow that's absolutely center cut, for shooting, the stiffer the arrow, the more it's going to stay at the angle it's being shot from. So for a right-handed archer, an extra heavy spine arrow will tend to go left. Extra light will tend to go right because it'll overflex, and match to the bow will tend to go center. The exceptions to that, of course, are if it's way extra light spine, it can literally break when you let go of the string. So that is one of the other safety concerns, is making sure your bow is close in spine weight to your bow or over the spine for the bow draw length. If you're way too light, like if you said, here, let me pick up this kid's arrow to demonstrate to this kid how it shoots, you might be setting yourself up for a broken arrow and lots of flying wooden bits. I don't know that there is anyone who's necessarily come up with a standard guide that when they're this much less spine is when you'll see them break. If they're within 5 pounds, I've not seen an issue. But I've certainly seen people who were trying to do things like thin out a flight arrow as best they could and had them disintegrate when they loosed because they just couldn't handle the force of the bow. We've seen some arrows that just cracked. Sometimes they already had a crack, but sometimes it's a case of their spine just too light, like maybe they're spine 20 pounds and you're shooting a 40-pound bow. So having your arrow the right length, having your arrow the right spine. There are spine testers available. They tend to be costly. The ones I've seen are, I'm thinking, in the $150+ range. I myself don't even have one. But if you're ordering arrows from someone, you would literally tell them what your draw weight is at your draw length. If you have that, bow scales can generally be attained for around $20 to $40, so it's a little bit less expensive and can help you figure out what the draw weight actually is at your draw, so that you can tell someone making arrows and then they would order or provide the correct spined arrow shafts for that draw weight. And same with length. You tell them, I'm looking for 29-inch arrows, 35-pound, and oftentimes, I want these colors, whatever. So, period or modern. Let's see, other actual safety concerns. If you have a self-knock, which I don't have an example of out here right now. So self-knock is where the knock is cut into the shaft rather than having any kind of glued on knock that's external. A lot of people are either doing a hardwood insert to help strengthen that, or they'll do a thread wrap at the base of where the knock is cut out. And what that does is that just helps it keep it from splitting down the shaft, because you've got a cut and groove. It's got this great opportunity, especially if the grain's aligned with the cut instead of across the cut, that the force of the string in that could start to split it. So having something to help reinforce it and keep it strengthened is a good plan. Okay. The other things I can think of is when you're approaching a target to pull these out, be cautious. I have at times not seen, because of coloring or whatever, a knock and leaned forward and cut my head open slightly because I nailed a plastic knock and it managed to cut. So be aware of what's what. When you're pulling from the target, we recommend grabbing as close to the target as you can, because if you grab back here and pull, you can introduce bend in your arrow shafts, which, while not an inherent safety issue, will certainly change the consistency of your shots. If you have some that are bent, some that aren't, some that are bent opposite directions, you can quickly find yourself frustrated and wondering why they're not all going in the same area on the target, and may need to spend some time straightening them. Okay, I believe that should cover most of the things. I will comment on one other thing. This is a 4-fletch arrow. This is a 3-fletch arrow. Neither of them is specifically better than the other. A lot of people for timed ends tend to prefer 4-fletch because you can knock it either direction and it doesn't matter, the fletches are the same. Whereas 3-fletch, ideally, you're knocking it so that what's referred to as the cock feather, or the feather that's lined up perpendicular to the string, is away from the bow, because if that's against the bow, it can kick that end out as it flies through. I would also mention that at about 20 yards where we do our non-ICAC timed ends, that's probably not going to make that much of a difference. So if you do happen to be shooting 3-fletch and grab it, knock it the wrong direction, you're probably just as well off going ahead and shooting it instead of taking the time to unknock it, spin it around, knock it, and then shoot it. Just shoot it and get the next one. Yeah, it'll affect it slightly, but it's less of an effect at 20 yards as it's going to be at 30 or 40 yards. I have had some where I've had a fletch rip off. Again, I can generally, for timed ends, you can make do and shoot them, but for royal rounds, again, especially at distances where you really need the fletches to catch the wind and spin the arrow, I would recommend waiting until you can replace it if you can. For 4-fletch, if you rip a fletch off, so again, you probably can shoot it just fine. I haven't actually had that happen to try it myself, but because if you have 3 fletches, especially if there's much helical to them, which I always put on mine, then it's still should catch the wind and spin the arrow. All right, I think that pretty much covers things. I hope that this helps and provides some information that is useful. Thank you for watching my video.